Hello, welcome everyone. My name's Amanda Wojcik and I am the department head at the University of Oregon, and welcome to our Career Futures 2022 event. I'm here with three wonderful distinguished alumni, Sarah McKennis, Jesse Sugarman, and Heidi Schwegler. Welcome and thank you so much for coming. We have a group of students that are here. And it'd be great if you could leave your cameras off and mute on or stay muted. We're recording this and it will be archived, so that will be helpful for us. We have a land acknowledgement in the chat, and also bios for our panelists are in the chat. And we have about an hour and a half together. I have some questions to ask our panelists, and then you can enter questions. You can either use the raise hand function or you can type your questions into the chat. If you raise your hand, you can unmute and ask your question and then remute, and we'll enjoy this. So thank you and welcome everyone. So we're going to start with just having all the panelists introduce themselves. So please tell us your name and what year you graduated and what you did when you, where you reside now. And I'm looking at the wrong paper, and what you do now. Thank you. Sarah.
Okay, hi everyone. So happy to be here. I'm Sarah McKennis. So I graduated from U of O in 2016, and I currently live in Los Angeles. So I've been here for about exactly 5 years now, and I'm actually hitting the road tomorrow to drive across the country to move to Brooklyn. So that's a big adventure. But I focused on painting. I'm a painter. Although my work also touches and engages with sculpture as well. And let's see, what do I do? So I work as an artist. I am represented by Diane Rosenstein Gallery in Los Angeles. And I actually just opened a 3-person exhibition with Diane this past Saturday. And I also have a day job too. So I work as a product designer for an ed tech company during the day as well. So.
Good afternoon. I'm Jesse Sugarman. I graduated with an MFA in digital arts in 2010. And I live in Bakersfield, California, Central California, where I am a professor and chair of the Department of Art and Art History at Cal State Bakersfield. I also this year am curator of our campus gallery because Jed Caesar, our normal gallerist, is on sabbatical and in Germany. So I currently have a show open there. I worked with Aurora Tang from the Center for Land Use Interpretation to sort of like build a Bakersfield, Central California oriented show, which is just kind of exciting. It's the first time I've gotten to unlock a door to a space in 3 years and like let people in. So that's been a lot of fun. And I'm also working on building my own space in Bakersfield. I bought a big building a number of years ago and built a gallery, and I'm building a little like performance space in the back. And it's been slow going because I have kids, but it's still sort of a fun process to continue on with. And it's gonna, when it eventually opens, it'll be called New Country, and it's sort of a space that uses country music, or like an open interpretation of country music, as a bridge to consider sort of social divides, working both in sound and installation. And that's it. I'm a video artist too.
Awesome, thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heidi Schwegler. I guess I'm the old person in the group. I graduated from the U of O before it was actually built in 1998. I'm just kidding. I was in the jewelry metalsmithing department. I'm a recovering academic in Yucca Valley, California. I was in Portland, Oregon for 20 years. I do not know how that happened. I was at Oregon College of Art and Craft. I started as a studio manager in the metals department, and I stuck around long enough. I eventually became full professor and chair of a graduate program there, and decided it was time to do something other than teaching. So within the span of about 24 hours, we bought property in the Mojave Desert. First and foremost, I'm an artist, but I also didn't want to become a recluse out here. So I built the business plan for Yucca Valley Material Lab, which is an artist residency and workshop program in the high desert. And it's been absolutely incredible. It's very, very different than Portland, Oregon. But this little community is an exploding group of artists and musicians. We're here at a very, very special time. So I make work and I work with artists, and it's been great. I think that's all you asked for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So exciting. Can you briefly describe your work? What do you make? What ideas are you engaging, and where do people typically encounter it?
Okay, I guess I'm next because I'm up, but so I make sculptural paintings. I actually have a piece up in my house, so you can see like a corner of a painting on the right-hand side of my screen. But they're sculptural paintings that with canvas, I'm like twisting, pulling, pushing like a second layer of canvas on top of a flat canvas to create a form that, is reminiscent of clothing, of bed sheets, of sails. So it's kind of thinking about textiles and the body. And for several years, my work also had a component that was like a graphic element, like stripes or grids, that was in kind of juxtaposition to that kind of softer sculptural form. And I was really interested in kind of the play of that illusionistic painting with the sculptural form. But recently, in the last year, my work has started to change a little bit, and I'm not making paintings with that graphic element. It's just more focused on creating that sculptural form, focused on surface, on color, and kind of the interplay between kind of how color interacts with that form and light and shadow. And let's see, my work is typically encountered right now, I would say, in commercial galleries, art fairs. I've also done a commissioned piece for an interior designer in Los Angeles. So I have a piece up in a hotel in Santa Monica right now.
Thanks.
Jesse.
I work primarily in video and performance, and I'm sort of like video native. That's what I like to work in, and my work considers cars and car culture and the history of automotive design as an index of like recent cultural history, and I sculpturally, I sort of work around the idea of the car accident and making sort of large scale sculptural car accidents with actual vehicles and filming them. And then, and they're sort of like a little maybe scary and excessive. So which I get pulled into these performative situations because people very much want me to do them live and in places, and I try and noodle around that as much as I can. But I had a really sort of interesting forced vacation in the last couple of years. I have two small children, And it just like COVID was a really bad time to do big, silly projects with, in public. So I've was kind of pushed into the studio and have really enjoyed being there and am like wanting to linger there a bit longer. I've been working a bit more with sound. I've been making these really unpleasant sounding instruments out of car horns that I'm trying to sort of tame a little bit, but working there and just working more in like a sort of just like regular studio environment, things in front of me. My work is most typically seen on the internet, pretty much. Like I had my last sort of major solo show in 2019 up in Portland at 1430. And with that, I make work at a local used car dealership. When I'm working with these big things, I just sort of like became friends with the people that work at this car dealership. And now it's kind of like devolved into me just hanging out at a small like buy here, pay here lot in Bakersfield. But it's fun. I'll stop there.
Great.
Thanks.
So I would say my elevator speech, because when you're in college, they always have you practice your elevator speech, was probably that I made beautiful objects about messy and depressing subject matter. And that probably is still holding true. I'm not interested in making messy objects about messy subject matter because that would be super redundant and kind of a one-liner. So when you're dealing with kind of difficult issues, and you make an object that's really beautiful and well taken care of, it allows for a certain sort of friction and they kind of push against one another. And to me, that's where the object starts to become provocative. I'm also very proud to say that I've been known to be called a street cleaner. I do walk around and I gather trash when I see it. I prefer to say I'm an urban archaeologist. So I'm really drawn to the stuff that you see in the gutter, that's rolling down the street, that's shoved in a chain link fence. And I have a very large database of visual images and video of these things that I then bring back as fodder in the studio. But if they're small enough, I'll stick them in my backpack and I'll bring them back and I'll start working with them directly. I would also say that I am a sort of material junkie. So the world is my oyster in terms of whatever material I use. In fact, I use material that best services the idea of the object. So material, craftsmanship, all of this has become really conceptual within my work. So I'll work with rotting cardboard, I'll work with chain link fencing. It just depends on where the idea is going. And where do you encounter my work? I was represented by Up4, Mark Moore, and Asphodel in New York, but COVID has really changed our landscape. So I now mostly show in artist-run spaces, which has been really quite exciting to kind of move away from the commercial sort of constraint. And my property, I live on 2 acres in the desert, and that allows me to work really large and to install it right here so I can live with it over time and let the desert kind of have a sort of hand in the making of those objects.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So thinking back to when you were a student at UO, can you tell us about 1 or 2 things that were of particular value or significantly influential while studying here?
Yeah, so I had 2 things that I wanted to mention. So the first one, so I got my MFA at U of O and it was a 3-year program. So I think for me as a student, like being really focused on experimentation without expecting like a cohesive body of work or objects that I really wanted to show. I really, like, especially my first year, I just wanted to completely dismantle the way I was making paintings and experiment in every way that I could. And I mean, ultimately, I think I threw away everything that I made my first year, but it was really important for me to give myself the freedom to do that. And I feel like by things that I started to make in my second year at U of O as a grad student, there are definitely ties to my work now from what I was making then. So, so really having freedom to play and experiment was really important. And the second thing I wanted to mention was Anya's career class that she taught. And I'm not sure, maybe somebody else is teaching it now, but it was a 1 week long, I think, class in the summer. It was like right after spring term ended, there was this 1 week class. And it was a career focused class that we just talked about, you know, grants, residencies, important career things that maybe you're not getting in some other studio classes. And what was really important for me from that was this kind of concept of like setting goals, kind of setting some short-term goals or other things that you want to get to that seem kind of impossible, but kind of breaking down like how you're going to get there was really helpful for me. Like I want to get into Skowhegan residency. Like how am I going to do that? And kind of breaking down steps of making a list of maybe residencies that you want to get into and applying to them each year until you get in, things like that. So, yeah.
I also really valued the 3-year space. And it's funny now because I, you know, like every year I have a sort of seminar conversation with a group of graduating undergrads about like approaching graduate school and how to consider it and how to best use it. And I do it with other professors, and it's fun. All the people who went to 2-year programs are really vehement that you got to go to a 2-year program. And all the people that went to 3-year programs are just like, no, it's just like, it becomes this tribe almost of how you spent that time and the way in which it develops you. But I think I also had sort of a throwaway output first year, but was also like incredibly important to my formation and really sort of allowed me to have space to kind of develop. Things that specific, it's, you know, Karts Uchi, who was my professor at the time, was probably the most involved person in my formation, but it was always when she got mad at me. So it's kind of it's hard to sort of like engage, you know, like looking back, like all the really like pivotal moments with Karts are when she got fed up with me, but she was a very strong presence, and you know the way the grad program was built, you had the ability to sort of like connect directly with a professor in that way. And then my cohort was very strong, and it was a group of people, a group of peers that I could really rely upon. And even after graduating, like, you know, early installations of exhibitions, I really couldn't get through them without that sort of like group of people to pick apart what I was doing wrong. And we continued that for years. You know, we've sort of, it's faded out a bit, but like we kept in touch and would really sort of like critique each other's processes for many years after graduation. Yeah, that's it.
Jesse, I love that you mentioned Karts. I have to say, I have her rock collection on my windowsill. It's a really special thing in my studio. Yeah.
I would say that the most valuable thing from the U of O for me was Kate Wogley. She was the head of the jewelry and metals department there. I was at University of Kansas applying for grad schools. I was trying really hard to be a hippie. I wasn't shaving. I had really long hair. I wore patchouli, and I made my whole decision on graduate school to go to Montana because I thought being surrounded by nature and all of this would be great for me, blah, blah, blah. I didn't do any research. And I get out there, and the head of the metals department had decided to become interim dean of the whole art department. So he wasn't present. It was a very white, male heavy art department, and jewelry and metalsmithing was really denigrated. It was very, very hard. I went to a seminar in Seattle. Kate was speaking. She blew me away. Wicked smart, very engaged with her current practice. I just was so inspired. I emailed her and I said, I need to transfer. She said, well, your work is really strong. I'd like you to come out, but not because I want to interview you. I want you to interview me. I want you to interview this program. And I thought, this is it. This is where I need to go. So Kate, she was fabulous to work with. I would say the second thing that I found to be really valuable was the location. You know, a lot of students choose their graduate programs because it's in an art center like LA or New York. You know, you are where you want to end up. But there was something about being in Eugene where I didn't have any of that other sort of noise. I was living in an apartment complex in Izzy Pizza's parking lot. I don't know if that's still there, Izzy's Pizza, but I was able to walk back and forth to the art department. So I was super close. I didn't have any distractions. It was incredible because of location. So yeah, those are probably the two most valuable things about the U of O for me.
Following graduation, what were your next steps towards pursuing a career in the arts, and how did you navigate these?
Okay. So let's see. So I graduated in 2016. It's been somehow 6 years already since I graduated. So right after graduation, I was lucky enough to get a job as a visiting professor at my alma mater, Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. So I went out to teach for a semester, and then came back to U of O and spent a term adjuncting. And I really wanted to teach. I really loved teaching when I was a grad student. So I spent time that fall applying to teaching jobs, but wasn't really getting any traction with getting interviews or anything for a teaching job. So I decided that I wanted to move to Los Angeles to just focus on being a painter and try to have a career in LA. So I moved to LA without, I didn't have a job lined up. Luckily, I had saved some money from the teaching job that I had so that I was able to move down and afford a couple months rent while I found a job and found a studio. But so I went down there, ended up finding a job as a nanny. I worked as a nanny as my day job for a few years in LA. And kind of the most important thing to me was getting a studio right away. So I got a studio, ended up kind of being the wrong one. So I moved after a month. But the second one that I got was really amazing. It was downtown LA. And my studio mate, who I somehow found on Craigslist, had just graduated from Yale's MFA program in 2016. So we had just finished grad school at the same time. And he was also a Skowhegan alumni. So we had kind of some mutual friends. And as I was kind of looking back on like what my trajectory was, I realized that that was a really important relationship for me, like right after school, and moving to a city where I didn't really know many people. So he was in like a similar kind of serious about his career. We had some mutual connections. He was somebody that I could go to openings with, try to meet people, meet other artists in LA. So that was really important. But in terms of steps I took in my career, I mean, really my focus was just on making paintings, and making my work no matter what. So sometimes, you know, the first year was really difficult, like having a day job and then working in my studio till, you know, 11 or 12 at night, working on the weekends, and things. But the way that I ended up meeting, so I would say getting a studio and making work, going out to openings and meeting other artists, and the way that I ended up meeting my gallerist was a little bit unconventional, but we kind of started off as friends first. And maybe like 6 months after I had met her, she started showing some interest in my work and asked to come for a studio visit. So she came out to see my studio and talk about my work. And from there, she offered me my first group exhibition at the gallery. And after that, brought me to Untitled Art Fair in Miami. So I was fortunate to have found her and have been working with that gallery since 2018 now. I think that's all I have to say about that right now. But,
Thank you.
yeah.
I was listening and kind of drifted away. Would you reframe the question for me?
Sure. It's just, how did you navigate your next steps after you graduated? Like
Gotcha.
what came after graduation? And yeah,
Thank you. My apologies.
it's okay.
I entered grad school with like really urgent and like poorly formed career ambitions. I had been I was a teacher at a boarding school in New York for about 7 years, and I found that I very much enjoyed teaching, and I really liked teaching high school students, but I also got really just sort of sick of parents. And I thought, like, if I taught at a college level, that there would be no parents, and that was correct. So I looked at graduate schools, and my one of my main things is like, how much teaching experience can I get? Like that was like a primary focus for me. And I was actually supposed to go to Montana. Yeah, my some friends in New York, we were all living in Brooklyn, and we were all going to go to grad school together. And they were, you know, just for our different things, but we were all going to leave New York and go move to Montana, which is like a New York dream, you know. I screwed it up. I bailed at the last second because the program at Montana was just not what I wanted. Anyways, I came in with this very strong interest in getting as much teaching experience as I could and learning as much about becoming a college professor as I could, which, and probably revising my last answer, probably the most important thing I did while at UO was be the student volunteer on a faculty search, which allowed me to see 300 packets and get a sense of how hiring is done and learn all that. And that was like a really strong tool. But once there, like, I got way more interested in making art and being an artist than I was in teaching. And I had this really sort of awakening of figuring out life could be more interesting than I was expecting it would be, you know, just through these processes of making and this interaction and this culture that I hadn't really been terribly tuned into prior. So I got really much more excited about being a student of art. like that became like what I really liked. And so at the end of school, I decided I I was gonna get a doctorate, and I got admitted to this doctoral program at VCU and got all the funding and all this stuff, and this is after I graduated. I stayed, and I was an adjunct professor at UO for a year, and during this time I got admitted to this graduate program that I was very excited about. And I also was getting some unexpected traction with actual like Portland art stuff that I didn't really see coming, but things started to sort of like unfold in front of me, and a lot of opportunities were coming up, and like people were looking at my work. So but I was still moving to Virginia. That was my plan until I got like, there was this a fellow named Patrick Rock who ran a gallery up in Portland called Rocksbox, who now runs a restaurant out on the coast. But he is the type of person that will write you like a 10,000 word email in all caps about what you should do. And he wrote me one of these at just the right time, and convinced me to not go get a doctorate and to stay, and keep working and keep being in Oregon for a bit. And so I did. It was very convincing, and I didn't continue my studies, and I focused on just making work and teaching. But I just kept applying for every job I could in terms of teaching jobs, and after a whole bunch of first round interviews, I got pretty good at them, and could get through them without screwing up, and then eventually had enough of a foundation as an artist that I could do something like move to Bakersfield and still have a sustainable career for a bit.
So let's see, in 98, or in my last year of grad school, probably the last semester, I spent so much energy sending out the yellow packets. I applied for everything that was out there. So artist residency opportunities, sabbatical replacements, teaching positions. I think I put out around 60 packets, and all rejections, which you just kind of have to get used to, except I did get a call from Christine Clark at Oregon College of Art and Craft. I had applied for this awesome artist residency program they had where you could go and stay at OCAC, actually on the campus, and have the studio for a whole semester and make work. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to keep going with my graduate work. And she called me and she was like, well, I'm really sorry, but you didn't get it. But do you want a job? And I was like, what? And it was to be the studio manager for the jewelry metalsmithing program. And it just seemed like, well, that's great. It's in Portland. That's a pretty cool city. It'll be an easy move, and we'll see how this develops. So I became the studio manager, and they gave me a few community ed classes. So I started to build up confidence. And I too want to say that one of the things that I value from U of O is that they allowed me to teach. So I was able to get some teaching experience while I was there. So I stuck it out, and eventually I got a full-time, assistant professor position at OCAC. Soon after moving there, for some reason, the Oregonian did this like 2-3 page feature on me and my work that I did at the U of O, these little plastic mouthpieces that I made. And I got into the Oregon Biennial. I got representation by Savage Gallery. So it was like instant community. And I guess I kind of took that for granted. It was just really easy to tap into the scene there and to carve out a life and, find studio space. And that's just kind of where I stuck for 20 years.
Thanks. What advice would you give to our current students who are earning their degree in art at UO? Are there things are there things you wished you would have done or done more of?
Okay. I mean, one thing I would say would be to really appreciate the time you have and the time you have to dedicate to your practice and making art. I mean, I remember when I was in grad school, it felt like I couldn't possibly be busier trying to balance like all the reading I had for classes and meetings and making work. And I remember a professor telling me the same thing, like, you know, you're never going to have as much time as you have right now. And I feel like that's true. Like things are just going to keep getting busier after graduation when you're balancing jobs and other life responsibilities and things. So really just like enjoying that and taking advantage of the time you have to focus on your practice. And the other thing I would say is like part advice and part maybe what I wish I had done more of, but just how important like the relationships that you're forming in school are. So to really take advantage of every time that you get to have like a one-on-one studio visit with faculty is like, it's just so amazing to have all those hours of smart, dedicated artists to be in your studio and focused on you and talking about your work. Because it's harder to do outside of school. Like you really have to put in a lot of effort to invite friends, invite, you know, whoever curators or gallerists over to your studio to get that kind of time and dedication to talking about your work. So that's just an amazing part of school. But also just spending time with your peers, spending time with your cohort in the studio, talking to each other about your work, but also outside of the studio. And maybe that's one thing that I wish I had spent more time on, was really like hanging out more with my cohort in grad school, because those are the people that, you know, hopefully you have lifelong relationships with after school. So, Jesse.
You know, I spend a lot of time sort of like directly advising undergraduates. And really what Sarah has described in the last round as what she did after undergrad study is, after grad school, sorry, is pretty much what I want students to be doing. Like pick the place, build your community, be visible, go to stuff, you know, like get out in this like world. And I urge students away from going directly to graduate study, typically. I think your work will tell you when you need grad school. If you are able to go and sort of corner yourself into becoming an artist and like really focus on just making work and being part of a community, there will be a point when like that next level you want to get there is going to require further study. And I really urge students to spend the time to get to that precipice as opposed to just like going straight and trying to like, there's a lot of students trying to maintain their momentum out, which is what I was trying to do. And I wanted to go to VCU, you know, this is great. I'm going to keep doing this. And I just don't think it's the smartest path. And I find that, you know, like graduate school is a big investment of time and money. I'd really be concerned of what it's going to do for you and attend it when you need to. Yeah, that's about it.
So advice I would give for students who are currently studying would be your thesis show, your BFA show. These are not the most important shows in your life. They're going to be a moment. I like to call them almost like a dress rehearsal. I feel like college, the whole experience is like a dress rehearsal. It gives you an opportunity to practice your voice, to practice your work, to practice speaking about it, engaging other people through language about your work. But it isn't the most important. And I can even say now, like 24 years after graduating, that every show I have is not the most important show. It's like the beginning of what's to come. So it ends up being this amazing string and chain of growth and expansion within your practice. So try to enjoy it a little bit. And then the other things, I mean, school was so different when I was there. The university is a totally different place. And I would recommend that everybody read two pieces of text. A book called The University in Ruins, which was written in the 90s, that it was very prophetic and talking about where the university was going, which is very different than it was then. And secondly, Birth of the Artist, Death of the Artist, Birth of the Creative Entrepreneur, written by Bill Deresiewicz. So when I was in college, it was really about sequestering yourself, developing your voice. You really kind of lived in a vacuum. It was really quite romantic. But what I think the college place is now, especially after having watched the institution change so much, is you really do have to be an entrepreneur. And so they never had professional practice classes when I was studying, and to really consider that and to consider, how can my creative practice sustain me? And that's not always through teaching. And to begin to sort of role play what you could do in your studio to not only satisfy you creatively, but to satisfy you financially. And to begin to build that while you're in dress rehearsal in college, surrounded by these amazing, brilliant people, I think is probably the best advice I could give. And I agree with Sarah, your community is more important than you realize. And to begin to build, to continue to really develop serious relationships with the people that you're working with, your faculty, visiting artists who come through, because that's the beginning of what your career as an artist is really going to be founded in, is really the people.
Thank you. We're kind of pushing our last two questions together a little bit. The last question is, what is the most important piece of professional advice you would give to art students who are on the cusp of graduation? And I feel like, Jesse, you already kind of addressed this idea of not doing something until it kind of reveals itself to you that you should do it right away, right? What are some other ways of thinking about that moment of transition?
Yeah, I'm thinking about like having a healthy balance between like envisioning really big goals that you have for yourself. Like if you want to be like a professional artist and you want to be represented by galleries in LA and New York and internationally, like you should have those really big dreams and you should like work really hard to go after it, because it is really possible. But to also understand that it might not go that way. And, you might have dreamed that you're going to be teaching and you're going to be a professor of painting, and it didn't go that way, but that you can be resilient and you can be flexible and you can find other pathways to financially support yourself. And also that, you might not end up being able to make a living just from selling your art, even if that was your ultimate goal, but that I think, just like Heidi was mentioning, finding a way to make your work, and that might be having a different kind of day job or something, and that you're still an artist and you can still find ways to have your practice and make the work that you want to make. Yeah.
I'll just go sort of small picture, but I guess like forgive yourself the reality of the situation. I guess would be my advice. Like my first job after undergraduate study was being a busboy at a restaurant, you know, and I feel like I feel like sometimes as teachers, we are setting up students for disappointment when you go through this process and win a book award and then you're bussing tables, you know, but it is sort of like the reality of the process. And specifically, I want to like give a shout out to food service, and just the processes of like working in restaurants and learning how to get through a lunch rush and learning how to complete that set of tasks. I think I started off working very, very young. I have like sort of I don't know, a background, but so much of my education came from the work world and not the glamorous one, you know, just like working in restaurants and like working hard, and being the hardest working person in the room. I just find it to be a really valid education, and the skills I learned in kitchens served me as a professor like every day, you know. It's particularly when you're talking about like building and putting on exhibitions. So I would say what point I'm trying to get to here is like sort of like forgive yourself the tasks you have to do, like it's part of the process, and see what you can learn from them, and don't think of them as an interruption of your approach to an ultimate goal. It's just a different kind of learning.
Oh my God, there's so much advice I could give. I think just the first thing would be to, there was a comedian, I think, that once said he once put out 200 applications in the hopes for 200 rejections. And when one acceptance comes back, then he's overjoyed. And I think it's so true to remember that you really should continue to apply yourself and to expect and normalize rejection, because it happens to all of us. And when it gets really rough and you are starting to lose faith and you keep getting rejections, to remember it all comes back to the work, and to get back into the studio and your relationship with the work that you're making. So to try to quiet some of that external voice that comes in once you put yourself out there, and remember that the reason why we're doing this, and yes, it is to connect to public and it is to communicate with other people, but the bottom line is that internal sort of primal drive to continue to make things. I would also say that it's your game, so you define the rules. There's no one right way to live the life of an artist. And like Jesse's saying, sometimes you have to take a job that it wasn't a part of your plan, but you have to do what you have to do to continue to keep going. It sounds kind of corny, but to develop a writing practice, like a visioning practice, can be incredibly productive. If you can write it out and you dedicate 15 minutes several times a week on really asking yourself, where do I want to be in 2 years? You may discover some things, and it will start to clarify what it means for you to be an artist and what that path can look like. Because if you start only getting into relativity, which is really easy to do with Instagram, you're going to find yourself disappointed. You have to define what it is for you. And I can't underscore enough, there's one person in this world who's going to help you more than anything, and that's the artist. It's not the gallerist, it's not the curator, it's not the writer, it's your fellow peers and other artists are going to get you much farther in your career. So invite as many artists as you can into your studio for studio visits after you get out of grad school or even undergrad. start to develop that community. And one last thing I want to say, if you're an undergrad right now, really, really, really question why you want to go to grad school. I really wonder if you know, if it's relevant for everybody. You're going to incur a lot of debt. And I wonder if there are other ways to think about what education means for you and other ways to kind of develop your practice outside of the academic institution. Decentralized art education is starting to proliferate in this country. And I think that you can think of different ways of activating where your work can actually go.
There are also a lot of fully funded programs that you should keep your
Yes, absolutely.
attuned to, like ours. You know, Jesse, I love that you talked about the food service step. I also share that step. When I got out of college, I was an art major, and it was a liberal arts college. So I didn't really think that I was going to become an artist or continue on that path necessarily. But I was sort of unconscious. I was surrounded by people that were talking about art as a senior in college, and those were the interesting conversations that I thought were normal. And when I got out and started waiting tables and working in a restaurant and hanging out with people, I found no one was talking about things that were interesting to me. I was like, what is this? Is this what the world is? And it was 2 years of waiting tables before I said, I want to go to grad school because I want to talk about those things again. And I want to talk with people who are also really interested in thinking that way and being that way. And so that it took a while, but then it obviously was, once I was back, yeah, these are the people I want to talk to. And I've managed to, you know, have them around me the rest of my life too, and in my career. So we have
another
oh.
note on the day jobs and things. So when I finished undergrad, I didn't work in food service, but I worked at a law firm filing papers for like 4 years while I painted in my studio at night, just because I wanted to wait after undergrad and make sure that I was dedicated to my practice enough that I could be making work outside of school, and that it was that important to me that after work at 6 o'clock, I would still go to my studio and I would continue to show up in that way and like make sure that my work needed it and I needed that community. And I felt like it was the right choice for me. And then I found a fully funded program to go to for grad school. So yeah, just to touch on that again.
So we have a time for questions. There's a question in the chat. What career advice would you have for students who aren't interested in grad school or creating works for galleries? And I also want to just point out, if you haven't read these bios, one thing I wanted to, maybe this will kind of dovetail, Jesse, in his final year at UO and his cohort, was one of the co-founders of Ditch Projects, which is still here in Springfield. And that was a really interesting project that might be applicable. And also, Heidi, you could talk a little bit about the project you've been working on there now for some time, but yeah, other things.
Well, I can respond on the Yucca. You want me to just talk a little bit about Yucca Valley Material Lab?
Sure.
And I can't remember what the question was.
So the question is actually, what career advice would you have for students who aren't interested in grad school or creating work for art galleries?
Yeah.
Other kinds of careers that are exciting.
I mean, I just feel like no matter what you do, and it took years for me to understand this, everything that you do actually does build up to where you're going. And to think of every experience that you have trying to make a living and engaging people in a community will eventually become the thing that you do. So it's all super, super important. If you're working in a bakery, if you're doing nanny work, I truly believe that all of that can kind of come together to create something. And I say that because of Yucca Valley Material Lab. Everything I did, every part-time job, factory work, academia, arts administration, all of it has gone into the building of this program. plus selling a Portland house. You know, you also have to think financially, you know, how do you support this dream that you might have? And you just kind of slowly start to build these things up. But I don't know. I think just it doesn't really matter. It's just knowing that everything can actually build into something quite spectacular, which I feel like this program has become. And I don't know. I don't know how that happened, but it's pretty cool.
Heidi, could you just describe in a little more detail for people who aren't familiar what Yucca Valley
I would
Valley
love
Material
to.
Lab is? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I already admitted that I'm a self-professed material junkie. So, and I also had a residency at Bullseye Glass in 2015 where they would invite artists specifically who had never worked with glass before. And I have to say, I worked as hard during that residency as I did in grad school at the U of O. I often equate the two experiences. It totally reinvigorated my practice to be a beginner again. My success rate was about 10%. It was humbling. It was inspiring. It totally activated me. When I moved to Yucca Valley, I knew if I didn't build something on this property, that I would become a complete hermit, that nobody would come see me. I was starting over again. And I also needed to make some money, and I didn't want to go back into teaching. So I decided to build every art. I think most artists have this fantasy of building a compound. So it is now an artist residency and a workshop program where you learn something new. That's the foundation. So artists come here for 2 weeks and they learn a new medium. It can be glass, ceramic, welding. They choose it. I find the instructor. They stay on the property in a camper. So you're in the Mojave Desert experiencing this really alien landscape and the Santa Ana winds, which I'm listening to right now. And you are a beginner again, and you fail miserably, but happily, because there's no pressure. You get to just explore new material, and whether you go back and work in that material again is a moot point. It's all about starting over again. And so I also get every artist dream where I can invite every friend that I have who knows how to teach something, bring them to the desert, and we have neon, we have basket weaving, we have, it can be anything I want happening right here. So it's like all that stuff I did for 20 years now has gone into this Quonset hut in the desert. But I do not undervalue anything that I've done since leaving grad school. It all adds up.
I'll jump in about Ditch a little bit. If, also, I posted a link in the chat to a spreadsheet of tuition free or like very limited tuition grad programs. I did not make this spreadsheet, but it has a lot of good information on it if anyone's interested. And I don't know that Ditch supplies a good answer to Liv's question. We started Ditch projects in 2008 as a group of graduate students. And it was a very good idea. Like it gave us a fantastic amount of agency as young artists, and entered us into the conversation so rapidly and gave us a stake in the conversation so quickly that it really helped us as artists get traction and push our careers forward. It's a terrible financial model. There's not profit to be made. So as a career, I don't know that Ditch provides many answers, but if you, it's a similar thing to Bakersfield. Like, we opened this space outside of a major art hub, and Portland at the time was a major art hub, and still is, but you know, we were far enough away that it was inconvenient to visit us, and we would get a lot of press and attention from people who hadn't come. We were just far enough away that we were this idea, you know, of like this thing happening somewhere else. And it's funny how much agency that gives you as someone a bit outside of like the main location, to be from far enough away that like people feel the need to include you. I think art is one of the few fields where the main institutions have an obligation to know what is going on at the little new institutions. And if like the major institutions don't acknowledge the new kids on the block, they somehow are falling out of step. And so you can take advantage of this by starting your own thing and requiring that the established venues kind of admit you to the circle. You know, you can do that. And so it was a strong move for us as artists, but no one ever made any money off of it. To answer Liv's question, my sort of universal advice is just don't urgently tie your financial needs to your career goals. Let them meet at some point in the future. When I graduated undergrad, I very much wanted to be a film editor in Los Angeles. And after busting tables, became like a PA at a really bad company. And then I eventually climbed the ladder at this bad company and was an assistant editor. But I also worked for free for a very, very cool company that made interesting stuff. And I could do that because I had income coming out of this schlockier job. And I just think that's kind of a useful model. Like, get yourself an income so you can do the stuff you're really interested in without worrying about milking money out of it.
Good. How can graduating students keep their motivation and drive for creating art if and when they are experiencing burnout? How?
I'll keep talking if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Forgive yourself. That's the main thing. If you have it's very easy to pile on to that burnout and to like accuse yourself and like if you just forgive yourself, if you lose it, if you lose the motion for a chunk of time, just it's okay and you can go back. You know, I like to have projects that really trigger me in the studio, like something that is a sequential thing that I've been working on forever. So I go in there and my first 10 minutes is just doing the required thing for this stupid sequential project I've been working on for years. And then I'm in the studio making stuff, you know, and that helps me go right back into making work. So that's like a practical tool. But yeah, don't get mad at yourself if you have to take a break.
And always, you know, don't forget that low stakes is actually not something to be denigrated, and to have exercises in the studio that maybe you think no one's ever going to see, and that you're not putting so much pressure on yourself, and it just becomes this playful sort of exercise in the studio that's private. And sometimes that's just enough to sort of break you out of something else that might feel really quite heavy. And it's kind of amazing how sometimes those lower stake exercises can inspire some pretty serious work.
Yeah, I would just echo also what Jesse was talking about. I mean, when I finished undergrad, I don't think I painted for like a year because it was hard. It was really hard to finish school and suddenly not be surrounded by professors and other students. To work a full-time job and make art is hard. So be a little gentle with yourself. But I also think that comes back to like having community, like having friends and artist peers around you, even if you're taking a break, I think can help be there to support you, or maybe seeing what they're doing can help you feel reinvigorated and excited eventually to get back in the studio.
You know, I would add too, because I've had many, many periods of burnout in my career. And I think showing up, like figuring out where that studio space is, if you have your table or you have your room or you have a space outside of your house or a building or whatever, just showing up and not putting a lot of pressure on yourself. It's not going to happen if you sit on the couch and feel like I'm not doing anything. Go in, have a very small goal, say, I'm going to clear off a table today, or I'm going to clean up some of the stuff that I'm not using, and just start moving things around, sweep the floor, stare at the wall, say, I'm going to go stare at the wall for 30 minutes. That's enough. And just a very small goal to kind of get back in, and, but gentle steps. I've had to do that many times and then I say it's climbing the mountain, right? It's like, oh yeah, I got to start way down here again because I haven't been here in a while. But just keep going back. Yeah. Don't.
Can I add one more little thing onto
Yeah.
that? There was a quote from Christian Boldansky that stuck with me ever since I read it. And he used to talk about how he would go into the studio at least 5 days a week. And there were many countless days where he would go in there and just moan.
Mm.
And it's kind of what you're saying, Amanda. It's like, just show up. It doesn't mean
Mm.
you're actually producing, but it's giving your studio space a little bit of a dedication, or dedicating yourself to that space, even if it's 5 minutes a day. And I love the idea of going in and just cleaning.
Mhm.
You know, you go in and you're just going to clean the studio, and that's all you're doing for the day, because that always sparks something, you know.
Or just cleaning like one corner of a table.
Seriously.
I mean, not small goals. Like, I'm going to open up this
Yep.
space.
I mean,
Yeah.
I agree, like sweeping is my favorite activity to be in the studio. But I think also, like what everyone else is saying, making a habit of it too. And not trying to say like, I'm going to go into the studio for 6 hours today, but I'm going to go in for 30 minutes, 15 minutes. Or often I'll give myself tasks that are literally like, I don't have to think about anything, like gessoing. Like maybe I'll just keep gessoing something like with a bunch of layers, because I don't have to make any decisions. It's just something I can do to kind of take one tiny step forward too. So.
But also, I want to say another thing about this. I'm not on this panel, but I have lots to say about these questions. You know, I have 2 children also. And so don't underestimate what you can get done in 2 hours. Like 2 hours is like an eternity now, right? Before I think, oh, I only have 2 hours. I won't go to the studio because I need 8 hours, or I need, you know, this ridiculous amount of time. 2 hours now is like a day. And it's amazing if you're organized and you know what you want to do. You spend a lot of time thinking about what you're going to do before you're there, and then you get there and you can do it. It's just a different kind of adjustment. But don't underestimate small pockets of time and how together they can build into a pretty big thing. Burnout. It's everywhere. Oh gosh. What other questions? Let's see. What is the process of getting a studio like? And also, how do you end up connecting with galleries? I think
I haven't
the names of
talked
the
in a
books
while.
are in the chat. Sorry. I think the names of the books are in the chat. University in Ruins.
I'm
Bill.
typing it up again just in
Okay.
case.
Okay. Process of getting a studio. Sorry.
So I've like realized the dream, you know, of like, I'm going to buy this little commercial building, and all of my wonderful art stuff is going to happen in this building. And I'm going to push back against that dream a little bit. I spend so much time dealing with this goddamn building. Like, it's just like, once you like own the real estate of it, it just becomes this whole other element that's kind of competing with your studio time. So I just know, especially like students, that they all like, I'm gonna, you know, like Heidi was saying, we all want our compound, right? And there's really something nice about simple spaces, borrowed spaces, rented spaces, temporary spaces, that are very liberating. So as someone who accomplished the goal, I don't wholly recommend it. In terms of, this is Max's question, in terms of like, how do you end up getting connected with galleries? It is the weirdest, most convoluted thing. I mean, maybe someone has a better answer, but it's, you know, like, you ever go to the SPCA and there's all the dogs in cages and you're kind of walking through? Like, I think that's the gallerist experience. And like, it's just this weird power structure that just because someone said one day, I'm a gallerist, all of a sudden they have this like strange amount of power over you. And I mean, that's an oversimplification, of course, but like, I don't really have an answer on how to get represented by a gallery other than read Ed Winkleman's blog and make sure you're there all the time. You know, like you're not going to get represented by a gallery the first time you walk in their front door. You have to kind of be a regular. But also I would say starting your own gallery and sort of usurping this power structure would be the way to go.
I agree. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, I was just going to say in terms of getting a studio, I had a couple different studio spaces in Portland after undergrad, and my first studio in LA. Believe I found them all just on Craigslist. Although, you know, there's different channels now, like I think I belong to a couple different Facebook groups now or something that are like Los Angeles studios or like New York studios for finding a space like that. But also, like, if any of your friends, like anybody you know who recently graduated and has a studio, I would say really reaching out to like friends in your artist network or faculty who are in whatever city that you want to be in. If they have a studio space, reaching out to them because they might be in a building and know about spaces that are going to be opening up is a good thing to do.
Yeah, decentralized studio space. I think it's really liberating to think that the studio is actually just where you are. And it doesn't have to, especially right when you get out of school, it doesn't have to be this dreamboat 2,000 square foot space. It could be your kitchen table. And what's been interesting over the years is to watch how my work is in flux, mostly scale, depending on the space that I'm in. And it doesn't mean, you know, there's no value to that. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. It's just that you make the work where you are. And in terms of galleries, like Jesse said, you just have to be present. You have to be at the openings. You need to engage the artists that are in the gallery. Just be a part of the community. And I think it will naturally start to follow. But I also fully believe in artist-run spaces. So here again, that comes back to having lots of friends who are artists and being present for them and saying yes to every invitation, you know, just being, it's a very social sort of life in a way, especially because we're always trying to engage public. So you have to sort of make that a part of your practice. Is there's a certain amount of social sort of engagement.
I have one more thing to say off of what Heidi was saying about the studio being where you are. I mean, what I mentioned is studios, outside studio spaces that I have had. But I also, you know, like when the pandemic hit, like I lost my job and my paintings weren't selling and I couldn't afford my studio anymore. So I had a 1-bedroom apartment in LA and I moved my bed into the living room and I turned my bedroom into a studio for like 6 months and made that work. And then for the last like year and a half, I had a detached garage behind my apartment in Venice. And so that's been my studio last year and a half. And it's been amazing to have a space that is essentially at home, that I can just walk out the back door and go to my studio. So it doesn't have to be in a studio building. It doesn't have to be in a commercial space with other artists. It could be your bedroom. It could be your kitchen table. It could be some space that is big enough for you to make your work.
I have to tell a funny story. When I got out of grad school, a couple of years later, I went to visit a good friend of mine, and he lived in New York, and his studio was his hallway. So it wasn't even a room.
Wow.
And we were standing, 2 feet away from the work to have a conversation about it. And that's, there was paint in a little box, and he's a really, really interesting, successful artist, but we were in a hallway. That was it.
Better than the bathroom, I guess.
Yes. Who has other questions? Any questions? You can ask anything. This is like a very small group of people, and these are alumni, and no one's here. You can ask anything in the world. What do you want to know? I think I'm just going to talk about the gallery thing too, because I think that's another example of maybe not like necessarily, it's not a direct route, right, to get to a commercial gallery, and really thinking about showing your work in artist-run spaces, applying to exhibitions that maybe you think are, I don't know, when I first moved to Oregon, that was the Oregon Biennial. I didn't know what it was. I just put a couple slides. They were slides at the time, slides in the mail, and was in that show. But gallerists go to other shows. They don't just visit galleries, and they are looking at the interesting artist-run spaces, and that's why they notice work. And also don't be too preoccupied with the studio visit, because that can be really hard to think about getting a studio visit and who's going to come to my studio. And of course, I live in Eugene my whole life. No one ever comes to my studio unless they're my friends, really. It's like, but you're going to always be talking to people that you never know who you're talking to. And then things are sort of connected in unusual and unpredictable ways. So just trust that showing up and having conversations can sometimes lead to things that it's not a direct. Right.
Also, I sort of hate this answer, but I will say that Instagram is a tool that's at your disposal for posting, for connecting with artists, for connecting with other people in the art world, for seeing what other people are making, for posting your work. And it, there's a lot about social media that is terrible, but it's also this amazing place that you can put stuff out into the world and people can see it. I think that, like, maybe when I showed at National in Portland, I think I found May, the owner and director of the gallery, through Instagram, probably. So use it for what it is, and like don't discount it as a tool that can help you.
So Marilyn just asked a question that I'd love to answer, coming from my perspective, in terms of, would you recommend putting unfinished work in your portfolio? Are there recommended pieces, skills to put in your portfolio? That's impossible to answer until you know where the portfolio is going. So sitting from my perspective as the director of this program, when people apply to the program, the applications and the portfolios that I respond to are the ones that show that these artists know something about Yucca Valley Material Lab. So that, in a way, is kind of exciting. You're going to curate your portfolio depending on where you're sending it, and to think about who is the audience for this portfolio. So what needs to go in there for it to make the most sense, that you've done the research in terms of reaching out to them. If it's just more of a generalized portfolio, that's harder to answer. But I think when you're applying for things and you're submitting portfolios, really do your research in terms of what is this opportunity, and then you curate and cater it to that specific opportunity.
Another word for unfinished work sometimes is work in progress. And it does kind of, like, there could be things that aren't totally finished, but a lot of the ideas are evident and visible. And so that's another way to think about it. If it's not, delivering anything of itself yet, I would say leave it out. And you could check that with a friend. Just.
I'll I'll go a little bit more foundational on this question. I feel like I have a lot of undergrad students who think a portfolio is like a buffet of all your myriad skills to show how well you can do these 4 or 5 different things. And like, you never need that portfolio, pretty much. I mean, whatever you are pursuing through a portfolio should sort of design it for you, as Heidi mentioned. And then the other thing I'll just say is, don't ever put homework in your portfolio. Like, we see it, we recognize it. If you're looking for an academic thing, like anything, if there's, we know every art assignment there's ever been. And if you put homework in the portfolio, we will know it's homework and we will hold it against you, or at least I will.
But you're talking about for grad school.
I'm talking about for anything.
I mean, if you're an undergrad,
if someone sends me a drawing of a shoe, they're out. No matter what it is.
no shoes. When doing a BFA, do you have any advice on choosing just one concentration?
I like material too much. I'd say do it all, but you have to do what's feeling right for the work, you know, like, I don't know. I can't believe there's still concentrations. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah.
I'll take, oh, sorry, you want to go ahead, Sarah?
No, I'm thinking I don't know how to answer either. Go ahead.
I'll take a shot. I do, like, in sort of like orienting myself, it was what would I lose track of time doing? And as an undergrad, I found when I was editing video, I would lose track of time and I would miss things I was supposed to do after I edited video. And I sort of recognized that as a quality, you know, and so I would just keep an eye out for what is it that you lose yourself in, that you can sort of like completely immerse yourself in, and then come out a bit confused where the time went. I would concentrate in that.
That's really funny. When I was in undergrad, the thing I used to do all the time was go to the junkyard. It was in upstate New York, and I get things, and then I would lose my time grinding the rust off of things. I would grind steel all day long. It's something I would never choose now in my life, because I can't. It was like just cleaning the surfaces to reveal something. But I spent hours grinding steel. That's so funny. So any last questions before we go? We have just a couple minutes before there are some breakout rooms. Does that come right after this?
No.
No. Okay. Sorry. Later. Portfolio review. Sorry. Whatever email you got, follow those directions. No more questions? Thank you so much, panelists. It's really amazing to see all of you and to remember the things you were doing when you were here and to hear about the things you're doing now. It's really, really great. Thanks for joining us. And yes, this will be, oh, there's one more question. Look at this. What is one thing, maybe multiple, that you love about your practice? It's a good question to end on. The love question.
I'll go back to what Jesse said. It's this ability, it's like the deepest form of meditation that I've ever experienced. It's this ability to kind of lose yourself and all your worries in this magical moment within the studio.
I love the physical history it creates for you. The way things you have made change and shift over time. I really don't always understand something I've made until I can remove myself from a couple of years from it. And so it's this constantly sort of evolving past that I find really interesting and engaging.
I mean, I love that I love that I have an opportunity to have an idea and then make something that's a physical object in the world. That it existed in my head and is now there. And like Heidi was saying, something that can be like a meditative process, like I can go out and mix paint, or I can, be making a form out of canvas. And it's like I am thinking with my hands and with my body for a while in a different kind of way. That feels like a really amazing escape to me too. So, yeah. That's it.
Terrific. Thank you all so much. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. So nice to see you all. And this recording will be available on our Career Futures website next week, so you can watch it again.
Thank you so much for the
Sure.
invitation. This was really fun.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kevin.
Thanks. Hi, bye. Are we good?